It's been another busy week here at your local election headquarters. We thank you so much for joining us on this Election Extra. I'm Matt Mauro, joined with our political analyst, Democratic strategist, and senior presidential and gubernatorial advisor, Andy Boian, and a Republican strategist and the president of Advance Colorado, Michael Fields. Thanks so much for being here. We have less than 3 months to go until the midterms. Ballots will go out in less than 2 months here in Colorado. We'll talk more about some of the races in just a minute. But first, the major headline that everyone is talking about this week, you could call it the Air Force One switcheroo or the plane ruse. At the NATO summit last month, President Donald Trump and a few aides secretly switched planes. They boarded the catering truck right here after he publicly boarded Air Force One. People thought he was on that. A few people left. He took an Air Force jet. They went to the United Kingdom, leaving many behind, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, the press corps, Secret Service agents, many White House staffers and administration officials as well. The Washington Post broke this story this week. People have not stopped talking about it since then. I'm curious what you two make of this. Is it a huge issue? How much of an issue is it? Is it a question about trust, or is it sort of much ado about nothing and it really is about national security, Andy?
All that. I would say. I mean, there is history of this happening with my former boss, Bill Clinton, who changed planes in the Middle East before. And listen, it's security for the President of the United States. I understand that part is not in question at all. The question that I have about this is that he left a plane full of people that thought he was on it, left assets on the plane, including members of the cabinet. He left the media press corps there, and he left several administration officials there thinking he was on the plane. And that plane apparently, allegedly, from what I hear from news, was a potential target. So if that plane was hit, he wouldn't be on it. He'd be okay. But all the people that work for him and with him on that trip would have been hurt. And that part I can't quite get over. To put a president in a catering truck also sounds pretty crude to me. It sounds like it was poorly planned, didn't make a lot of sense. I understand they had to move aircraft, but I've been around presidents when they have to move aircraft, and I just got to say this isn't the way to do it. And I don't really understand. It's also a comedic line on late night TV right now, but it's also a very serious situation when the president of the United States is threatened directly. If he was, which Secret Service says he was, they had to move planes and they take him in a catering truck. I think we can do a little better than that. But I do think there's a problem with security if that's the way we're handling the President of the United States.
Michael, what do you make of all this?
Not that much. I do think it's making something out of nothing, given the fact that it is a national security issue. It is a possible emergency that was going on at the time, and if there's a possible assassination attempt at overseas, especially. I mean, this is something that obviously the other plane was being defended too. Both planes were going to be defended while this was going on, and everybody has to get out of there. Everybody has to leave in some way, and so, I mean, you think about this, even on, when there's an attack, 9/11, the president goes and gets special treatment and ends up in a base somewhere, and not everybody gets the same kind of treatment.
He was at Air Force One.
I think that is something that, it had to have been a credible enough threat, because you think about Trump doesn't want to go get into the catering, vehicle and go off. That's not something that he would want to do. There had to be something there. And so, again, I think this stuff happens all the time. It was reported later. I bet you this happens, consistently with whatever president. Even Andy said this happened with Clinton, in terms of moving people around, trying to make sure the president is important because of the position that they are in.
Yeah, that was in 2000 in Islamabad, Pakistan.
I totally agree with everything Michael said. And as I said, this is a national security issue. The problem is that leaving people behind on a plane that Clinton did not. There was a situation where she did not put the aircraft in the air full of these people that could be basically a hit. And leave on another Air Force plane to the United Kingdom. It just doesn't make logical sense. It also sounds very selfish. And regardless of whether or not we have to protect the president, which is absolutely number one, I think he did it in a poor way.
Okay, now let's get to the major primaries that we had this week. A lot of people are talking about these as well. We'll begin in Wisconsin, a very closely watched Democratic primary for governor. Once again, the theme is the progressive, far-to-the-left candidate taking on a more moderate and establishment Democratic candidate. David Crowley, the Milwaukee County executive, barely won this race. He was the more moderate, the establishment candidate, upset Francesca Hong, the Democratic socialist and state representative. Michael, I'm curious what you make of this. You've talked about sort of Republicans have sort of bashed Democrats in this line of socialists and all that, but here the more moderate candidate won.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating race, especially because Crowley was somebody who dropped out of the race earlier because of bad polling numbers and fundraising, ended up back in the race a little bit later and ends up winning. The fascinating thing about it was how far he was behind in the several polls that were out, including a Marquette poll. It just didn't seem like that race was close at all, and then the votes started coming in and people were surprised and more surprised, and then he ends up eking it out. I do think it is part of this back and forth that we've talked about, DSA versus the more establishment, and both sides have had some victories. I think DSA has done better on some of these different races, eking out the one in Michigan for the Senate race, et cetera. But this is a big deal, and the reason why it's a big deal is because it's Wisconsin. If you looked at the chances that Democrats had, it was below 50%, before Crowley wins. Crowley wins, and it ends up being 77% or something right now. And so, I think the Republicans in Wisconsin were cheering for the fact that, hey, we want the DSA candidate to win, to take her on instead. That didn't happen. But I think this is going to be one where the Bernie Sanders wing of the party didn't show up as much and go and rally and do all the things at the end. I think they had it in the bag, and it wasn't a Senate or House race, and so they kind of took it for granted in that way. So I think you're going to continue to see this duking it out back and forth between, do we go and try to get somebody who's electable or somebody who excites the base and is running more on socialism. And so I do think that it will have impacts not only in Congress and Senate races, but also here in governor's races too.
Andy, do you see this as more about DSA and democratic socialism and that part of the Democratic Party, or is it more about Hong as a candidate? As Michael said, there were many things that people criticized, even Democrats criticized about what she had said in the past about abolishing ICE, abolishing prisons, and getting rid of Thanksgiving. Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did not support her, as they did many other DSA candidates.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. I think it's fascinating from a political strategy standpoint that this race was as close as it was, and also that he won, especially after dropping out. That Marquette poll that Michael referred to, he was down by 9 points. So if you're down by 9 and you're going into the primary, it's probably smart to think about either dropping out or just conceding and understanding you're not going to win the race. However, what happened with Hong, abolishing the Thanksgiving thing really was not only the butt of many jokes, but it was also, I think it backed people like AOC and Bernie Sanders off of this candidate. So I don't think it's so much about the DSA movement as I think it is about the individual candidate, particularly when, and also, David Crowley, strong candidate, well known in Wisconsin, has a viable chance against the Republican nominee. And I also think, Wisconsin, to Michael's point, makes a lot of sense because, this is a swing state. This is a state that both parties have to win in order to win the White House. And there has to be some sort of give and take here during the midterm. So we'll see what happens. But I think David Crowley is the best chance for the D's to pick up that seat.
What does this say about primary polling, and particularly in these sort of races with
how I feel about polling.
DSA? I do know how you feel. I think a lot of people do as well. But so primaries, first of all, and then you have DSA far to the left candidates. Here in Colorado, the polls sort of, I guess I should say, Malat Quiros overperformed the polls in terms of what she did when she beat Diana DeGette. When you look at Michigan a couple of weeks ago, Abdul El Sayed, he was projected to win by a lot, barely won. And in Wisconsin this week, Hong was projected to win by a lot and did not win at all, Michael.
Yeah, I would say it's very important. There is difference between general election polling and primary polling. And general election polling can be wrong, and we've seen it wrong in Susan Collins races and other presidential races. But typically it tends to be more accurate because people are less likely to flip total parties, and in the primary, hey, we like both these candidates, or I'm leaning this way. But then I talked to some people. Momentum, late movement is a huge thing. We saw it in the Weiser race. We saw it with Quiros. People deciding very late in the process and doing that. I also think that it's hard to get the right breakdown of who's going to vote. DSA really has a problem. You saw it in Michigan and Wisconsin with working class Democrats and with African American Democrats specifically. And so if you undersample, a certain group and they all vote a certain way, that can be trouble. So rarely can you look at primary polling and make a big deal out of it. And then in Colorado, we just didn't have many of them. We had one poll in each race or two polls. So it was almost nothing. So I think, the numbers that we were seeing, 20, 30-point leads in some of these Wisconsin polls made it so surprising. But it's obviously momentum matters at the end. And I do think that they're very inaccurate a lot of times.
They're not only inaccurate, but they're also, they tend to overperform how the candidate's actually going to do. So let's say in the Quiros race against DeGette, if people saw that she was going to win by a lot, they didn't come out and vote. And they thought, she's going to win by a lot. She ended up winning by 11. I understand that. But in this race particularly, it was shown that she was going to win. And so I think people stayed at home and didn't vote for her and thought she's going to be the candidate. This is how it's going. And it's moving this direction, at least a little bit state by state. So she's going to be fine. So I think primary polling, when you look at it from a purely strategic standpoint, shouldn't be relied upon early on because you have lower voter turnout when people think that they're going to win anyway. And secondly, not everybody shows up for these elections. So it's a tough way to rule in or out a party.
We'll use
or a candidate.
We'll use Wisconsin as a microcosm of this. But, okay, so the Democrats in this race who voted for Hong, are they going to show up on election night and vote for Crowley? Or do Republicans have a better chance and say you may have some apathetic voters there and some low turnout, and that's going to end up boosting their chance?
I think that they will probably show up for Crowley, just given the fact that there's this anti-Trump sentiment in certain areas. I also think, though, that you look at somebody like Tiffany in Wisconsin, it's going to be a close race. It's going to be a good race because Wisconsin's always a swing area, right? And it can go either way. I think that what you're seeing in a lot of these primaries is the college towns that are going far to the left. And you look at it on the map, it's really fascinating to look at each state and saying, oh, there's this is a college town, that's a college town. They're going for DSA. In other places, working class areas and African American areas are going the opposite way. And so I do think it will be a question of who shows up in general, right? Do people show up in those college towns or not? Do they show up anywhere? And I do think there's going to be this enthusiasm gap that you're seeing right now, as opposed to maybe we get a little bit closer to November and it changes some. But I do think that it's fascinating looking at the maps in some of these areas because of how the turnout looks.
The other piece of this is an independent voter. I don't think was considered enough in Wisconsin, and so I don't think there was a polling. I didn't see a poll of independent voters specifically. I saw party line voters, but I saw also a lack of interest by independents to even participate. And so I think they have to take that for granted, and it's unfortunate because I think at the end of the day in November it could swing either way. And like I said, Democrats and Republicans are both counting on Wisconsin to win.
Okay, we'll see what happens, and we'll come back. We'll talk about what happened in Minnesota this week and much more here on your Election Extra. Stay there. Welcome back to your local election headquarters. In this Election Extra, I'm Matt Mauro, joined by Michael Fields and Andy Boian. We just talked a lot about Wisconsin, particularly what happened with the Democrats and the more sort of established moderate Democrat there winning the primary for the governor. Let's go just to the west in Minnesota. We'll start with the GOP governor primary. Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, backer of election conspiracy theories, particularly after the 2020 election, backed by President Donald Trump, lost his GOP governor's primary to House Speaker Lisa DeMuth by 11 points. Michael, what do you make of this, and what do you make of how this could affect potential other candidates when they talk about election conspiracy theories?
Yeah, I think that this 11-point margin was pretty big and bigger than people might have thought it was going to be. And you kind of have a mainstream, Republican former Speaker of the House. Yeah. And you look at how it relates to other places. I do think that you're seeing a little bit of a pushback. If you look in Colorado, you had Joe Oltmann, who was running for party chair and lost. A few years ago, you had Tina Peters, who ran before she ended up going to jail and lost in her primary. I also think, before Polis, let her out. But I think that the whole stolen election thing is a little bit dated. I don't think election integrity in terms of, how do we make our system better? How do we have security within our elections? All of that is a topic that's always been around and should be around. But I think the 2020 stolen election part of it is getting a little bit pushed out to more mainstream Republicans who can go and win. And Minnesota's a tough place. You're probably not going to win as a Republican anyway, but it's the kind of candidate, the Speaker of the House is the kind of candidate you would have to take over a Mike Lindell. And so I do think that there's a group of people within the Republican Party that are vocal on this issue, but it doesn't make up a majority at this point. And you're seeing that happen, everything from state chair races to races like this, in the U.S. Senate or congressional races.
Andy?
This is a guy who was endorsed by Donald Trump, lost by 11 points. He makes pillows for a living, and he doesn't even understand politics. So thank goodness for Minnesotans to at least understand enough that they didn't elect some nobody, ignorant person to be the primary candidate. I think the other thing about Mike Lindell so interesting is he's not conceding. So he's not going to concede.
I don't know if that's interesting. It's not surprising.
I mean, this doesn't make any sense. The guy's lost his marbles, and thank goodness that the guy's not going to be in Congress for sure. But the reality is Republicans are putting up people the best way they can, which is people like Herschel Walker, people like Mike Lindell, people that have name notoriety, maybe are some superstars, but nobody knows Mike Lindell's going to do anything in Congress, and he's not. The guy's a loser. Glad he lost, and good luck with lumpy pillows.
Michael, do you think that Republicans would get more traction and more support for, say, the Save America Act and for issues with voter ID and all of that if they spoke and focused less on the 2020 election from a certain group of them, I should say?
Absolutely. And I would support. I think there's people that are out there that would say ID makes sense. We want to make sure non-citizens aren't voting. We want to make sure the right people, in terms of people that are eligible to vote, are the ones voting. We make sure that voter rolls are cleaned up. I mean, there's a bunch of things that we can do in every state. We want to make sure that there's consistency on the rules of when votes are counted and have the courts weigh in on all that. I mean, we've been going through this process, especially after COVID, and it's messy sometimes, and we need to get better at it. Colorado does do a pretty good job overall on elections, but I think there's a difference between, and Democrats used to talk about, election issues too. I think 2020 is the thing that's created, when you have Tina Peters or Lindell out there, lying about stuff or making stuff up, that undermines the system. And so I think, again, you can keep the issue of we need, voter ID and make sure that that eligible people are voting. On the other hand, we don't need to go back now 6 years to talk about something that, really wasn't a big issue then and shouldn't be right now.
This is a manufactured issue by the Republicans that has become such a big issue in 2020 and beyond that they have nothing else to talk about except for guys like Mike Lindell say the election was stolen, or to have people in front of Senate committees who won't admit that Joe Biden won. I mean, it can't actually say it because they're defying the president of the United States. I mean, this is bananas. And what doesn't make sense is, yes, Democrats have talked about it in the past, but it's been a problem in the past. We haven't seen any issues with voter integrity of significance in years. And so 2020, an election where Donald Trump lost the election legitimately. He's a loser. He lost, and he can't admit it, and it's just a problem. And it doesn't seem to be going away. It cost Mike Lindell an election, but it also is going to cost Republicans in the midterms if they keep talking about it. Tina Peters should go back to jail. In my opinion, I think Jared Polis was wrong, and I think Mike Lindell should go back to making pillows. And it doesn't make any sense why we're still debating this issue.
All right, one more question before I take a quick break here. I'm curious your take on Connecticut. Democratic Congressman John Larson, 78 years old, 14-term incumbent, was running for a 15th term, lost to Luke Bronin, the former mayor of Hartford. Besides the issue with the Democratic Party and the progressives and the establishment, it also is very much a little bit of what we saw here in Colorado and Denver with voters saying, I don't want people who have been in Congress for that long anymore.
Matt, we talked about this. We talked about this, even before the primary started, that people are not, it's not just about DSA. It's not just about socialism or communism or whatever you want to label it. It's more about generational change.
Yeah.
If you look at how the generations have changed, Donald Trump is going to be 80 years old, and he looks frail. He looks like there's something wrong with him, and I hope to God that he gets help. I will tell you, though, that incumbents that sit in Congress and run for re-election are going to have so much trouble this time, and they have so far, that's what's actually coming back to sting in both Democrat and Republican races. I mean, the Democrats are being voted out. Diana DeGette, a 30-year veteran of Congress, who is probably going to be in the majority if we won back to House in January, lost an election. I mean, it's just like, we want the people that have done nothing out and the people that will do something in. We just don't want the people throwing roses and lamps on TV.
I think it's surprising for people because of how long, certain people end up in office like we talked about, but they almost never lose, right? And so I don't think that we're seeing some huge wave of, 75% of incumbents who have been there are getting kicked out.
I do.
I think that we've seen a handful of them, and it's a big deal because it's happening there.
It always makes news when it does, particularly when it's in Denver.
Because it's normally like, hey, 95% of these incumbents do it. There are a few of these, and I do think there is a generational change that could be happening. I also just do think that there's a DC versus a state. You look at the Michael Bennet versus Weiser race. I don't think that all the Democrat Party fell in love with Michael Bennet and was so happy with him. It was, hey, we don't think, Phil Weiser, we don't think Michael Bennett's doing that great of a job, and we're frustrated with DC and anybody in DC, and you're not doing enough and all of this. And so then it's who's the alternative. And so I do think there is a major frustration from both parties with DC politicians, and then that really shows when an incumbent gets knocked out and they tend to be older incumbent. And so I do think here in Colorado we saw this just firsthand with DeGette, firsthand with Michael Bennet running for governor. But I think the people who benefited from it, weren't necessarily perfect candidates or what everybody wanted. It was just, we don't like DC. We don't like the people in DC. We're sick of it all.
The irony about all this is, though, that as Michael said earlier, some of these people don't do anything. Like John Hickenlooper allegedly doesn't do anything, although he does. He protects federal lands, but he does a lot more than that. But what's interesting is, this idea that they do too much in D.C., so they become the D.C. regular, and they can't somehow phase into a Colorado election like Michael Bennet. He was trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and Michael never got around that corner, and Phil Weiser did.
Just a theoretical question. You're right. People complain that people in D.C. and Congress, the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate don't do a lot, don't do enough for them as the average voter back here, whether it be in Colorado or another state. How do they start to get stuff done? Because it seems like we have heard this over and over and over again, but you need some sort of usually bipartisan unity to get anything done.
Yeah, and I don't think there's an incentive to do that. We've talked about this before, but it's the entertainment wings of the party that are dominating. And this is what I would argue. Sending a Kiros to Congress isn't going to get anything more done. It's going to get less done because you're going to have her on TV all the time saying stuff that Republicans disagree with. They don't want to work together, and this is what happens. So the system is hard. The system's hard to get stuff done. But when the outcomes are bad, right, when people are paying more for things, when things aren't going well in terms of people's everyday life, they're going to take it out on everybody, both parties, whoever's there. But I think, they really, I do wish that people got together, did more bipartisan stuff, but we're electing people and sending them there who say they're fighters, but they're really just going off on, cable TV and on their social media things to rip on the other side and to talk about nothing. So I think it's a fundamental problem that's going to take a long time to fix.
I actually think this system can self-correct itself, and so we've had the other side of the wing where Trump does nothing. He doesn't understand food prices. He thinks gasoline's down. He's totally out of touch. He's elderly and should leave. But then on the other side, you have people that are really actually trying to do something, both R's and D's, that are actually trying to do something with what's happening in Washington and having trouble doing it, and so they end up fighting with each other. The problem with all this is that candidates like we just had on TV today on our show are saying that they'll come on both sides and they'll make this work for both sides of the aisle, and that's just not logical right now. It just doesn't work. It's going to take a revolution to change it.
All right, we'll be right back. Stay there. Just a couple minutes left here at your local election headquarters on another jam-packed week of things to talk about. Before we go, a little special digital version of what's on your mind, Andy.
Sure. So I was looking at last week and thinking about the initiatives on the ballot for 232 and 195, assuming they make the ballot. What if they both win? What if they both win and they both say the same thing or roughly the same thing, but Tabor's obviously going to be changed if 195 wins. But if both win, apparently the one with more votes is the one that is impacted, and that's the one that wins. So just a funny, interesting political science question I had. Okay,
so just to clarify there will be a number of questions on the ballot. Could be. They haven't been certified just yet this November. One of them would put a cap on the income tax in Colorado at 4.4%. The other would then start a gradual income tax rate right now. Colorado has a flat tax at 4.4%. For some people, their income tax would be lower. For others, particularly those who make over $500,000 a year, it would be higher.
So you want to push for the votes to be higher than lower, for sure.
Okay, Michael?
And I would also stick with ballot measures. One of them that just got qualified that we have is the right to natural gas. And you think about everybody's energy bills being high. We believe that natural gas is cleaner, more affordable, something that is more reliable for people, and so that will be on the ballot too. You're going to see a huge ballot, probably 14 or so measures that people will get to weigh in on, which is more than any other year in recent history.
Just don't forget to vote.
Yeah,
don't forget
absolutely,
to vote.
All the way down the ballot.
And you mentioned it there that I think the Denver Post, I believe, was the one who had the article about it this week, talking about, as you just mentioned, this could be the most initiatives on the ballot, besides all those other races with candidates, that Colorado has ever had.
Yeah, it's going to be a big ballot for sure.
Okay, we'll see. And those will go out the beginning of October. They'll start going out a week earlier because of a law that was passed by the legislature this past session. Andy Boian and Michael Fields, I'm Matt Mauro. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.